What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 10 of the Endless Endeavor podcast with Greg Anderson. Today, we're going to do things a little different. If you're watching, you can see I'm at my house again, although I'm not standing in front of the mirror like last time. I got a lot of negative feedback. So we're downstairs. We're in my living room. The kids are out with mom, and hopefully the cats and the dogs aren't running around causing too much of a ruckus. But, you know, this whole podcast thing for me was kind of strange to get into to start with. And I never thought that I would be offering a podcast and be offering content for people to interact with me and ask questions and whatnot. And it wasn't until I did Andy Stump's Cleared Hot podcast that I started getting hit up by all kinds of people that were like, wow, that was a really good show. We appreciate your perspectives. You were really good, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, a lot of the messages that came in talking about Andy Stump's show that I did with him was like, one day you should do your own podcast. You should try this. And, you know, especially considering I don't have a lot going on right now outside of my Jiu Jitsu academy, I thought, why not? It would be fun. And if it takes off, it takes off. And if it doesn't, well, then it is what it is. And so now we're on episode 10 and I've really been enjoying it. I've got a lot of positive feedback from people, and just like Andy Stump gets his Full Auto Fridays with a lot of questions coming in, I guess that's just the nature of once you start to put a product out, people are listening to it. I've received questions as well. So I thought maybe I should do every 10th episode, just interact with the people that are listening to my show, however large or small that number happens to be. And part of the reason that intrigued me and kind of motivated me to do this is I think the podcast medium is something that people go to because they're looking for interaction. They're looking for conversation. And I know me personally, I listen to a lot of Jocko. I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan. I listen to Andy Stump, and I find myself filling time, especially when I was commuting a lot. And even though you're not physically part of the conversation, I think it's tuning into that social aspect of kind of what we crave as human beings. And you're partaking in something. And if you talk to those guys, you hear them say often, like, when I interact with fans, these people actually know who I am. It's like I'm a long lost friend, even though they've never met them themselves. And that's because even though this medium is being delivered through our cell phones, you are getting to know the person that's hosting the show, sharing their ideas, sharing their feelings, and there is a relationship. So it's pretty interesting that that's just something that's available with the technology we have today. So yeah, today's been interesting. I may be canceling plans. I was going to go do a podcast with Mike Glover. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He runs the American Contingency, and he's having some vehicle problems. So we were supposed to link up on Wednesday morning, and we're going to do a show together. That will be coming in the future. I'm not quite sure the date, but hopefully the near future. But yeah, he was talking about that Jacob Blake shooting where the officer shot the individual who was getting into his car. And I posted a video talking about how a lot of times people, including myself, keep firearms underneath their seat. Now, I've got a ton of backlash from people, and you know, it's the internet. So no matter what you say, you can't appease everybody, and people spew hate towards you, unlike any other platform. But you know, I think my point of posting that was that it is very easy, plausible. It's likely that if someone claims they have a weapon, or someone is, I believe he stated that he had a weapon. I don't know all the facts, just like you guys don't right now. And then he was running back to his car, getting underneath the seat. Well, guess what? If he's saying that he has a weapon and now he's doing that, you can understand why the officer may have believed what he believed at the time. And I just want to bring this up because I think it's very important for us to distinguish bad shoots from shoots that we don't know all the facts surrounding them yet. And this is certainly one of those shoots. There's a reason why anytime an officer is involved in a shooting, they put them on administrative leave, and there's a big in-depth investigation that goes into place. And that's because they have to take into account all these different facts leading up to the point where the officer drew his weapon and fired it. And so none of us, including myself, have all those facts, and we'll see what happens. But the thing is that a shooting like that, where the guy was being arrested for a warrant. He was resisting. He was even stating that he was going to be combative. That doesn't fall into the same realm as the George Floyd thing, in my opinion. And I think people are quick to take every incident now that happens across the country and just attach hatred towards police, attach outrage to it. And they're already rioting and burning stuff. And we don't even know all the facts yet. So for all the people hating on me, I saw a bunch of comments. I stopped reading them because people are like, I followed you because I thought you were one of the good cops, and now you're supporting this kind of shit. And it's like, I'm not supporting good cops or bad cops. I'm supporting people that make judgment calls based on the facts and circumstances that are taking place in real time. And if it turns out to be a good shoot, then I'm going to support that cop. And the other side of the coin is when cops are doing things that are messed up or they're infringing on people's liberties, I think I, more than most cops, call them on that and bring public attention to that. So yeah, it's weird how people always want to I feel like they want me on their team. Like I'm on the fuck the police team or I'm on the back the blue team. And I think that's part of the problem. My team is people making good judgment calls, being ethical, doing the right thing. And when they're not doing that, then they should be held accountable. And people aren't held accountable anymore. Like I haven't seen any news sources saying the things that did take place, i.e. the statements he was making, him resisting. I think CNN's headline was "Man shot in front of children in back," something like that. Just obviously taking what they can take out of that situation, piecing it together, and just making it very controversial. And if you guys haven't noticed, controversy between people is what's tearing this country apart right now. So there's my little rant to start out episode 10. I'm just going to read down the questions that have come to me in the last couple of days. I've chosen a few of them, and I'll just kind of share my thoughts on different aspects of its police work, jiu-jitsu, the type of things that people would want to ask somebody with my experience. So the first question is from, first name is David. I'm going to leave last names out just in case people want to be anonymous. It says, Greg, I'm from a remote town in the mountains of Arizona, with the nearest BJJ gym being 2 to 3 hours away. I rolled for a year prior to moving back home and have had the bug ever since. My question is, how can I get any sort of training without a gym nearby? As of right now, I've resorted to watching breakdown videos and doing light rolls with my spouse when possible. Thank you for your time. So thanks for the message, Dave. I'll tell you this. At the end of the day, you're going to have a training partner, somebody that you can put the hours on the mats with. That's the first and foremost. In my opinion, if you don't have that, it's not going to work. Now, you said you've been rolling with your spouse a little bit. That's totally going to depend on what she wants out of jiu-jitsu. If she can be that partner, or maybe she can't be that partner. There's a lot of female athletes that I've trained with that are phenomenal training partners, but they got to be training partners, not just a dummy that you say, hey, stand right here. Let me put you in a guillotine. What's this feel like? It's good to have someone that wants to be on the journey with you. So I say the first and foremost thing is find at least one person that wants to train consistently with you. Map out a schedule, put some mats in your garage and say, hey, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m., we link up for 2 hours or whatever it is. The next thing that is going to be necessary, in my opinion, is finding an instructor. Now, your message said the nearest gym is 2 to 3 hours away. So this is what I would do if I was in your position, especially someone that's been rolling a year. You have a little bit of experience, but you're also very new to jiu-jitsu as well at the same time. I would find that instructor at the gyms that are 2 to 3 hours away and explain your circumstances to them. Say, listen, this is my situation, and based on my geographic location, I think I'll be able to come to your academy one time a month. And just agree on a price. And maybe that one time a month is even a private session. So he's focused on you as opposed to just joining a random class, and work something out with him and say, the majority of my training is going to be with another untrained person. And This is how many hours a week I'm going to be putting into jiu-jitsu. And then take that and allow him to say, okay, Dave, for the next month, I would like to see you work your triangle to armbar transition and have him piece together something for you to work on. He can show you how to do that. He can give his tips and his pointers on those specific techniques. And then for the next month, geek out on that. Like you said, you're watching breakdown videos, and then there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. And I try and tell people, don't rely on YouTube, because there's a lot of what I call invisible jiu-jitsu, and that's pressure, and that's like the little nuances that are so microscopic you can't even visually see what's happening. But the other side of that is it's all you have available, so let's make it work. Let's make it work as best we can with what you got. And then for the next, for that month, work that position, work that submission, drill it until you can't drill it anymore. Then you go back to that instructor and say, okay, check it out. This is where I'm at on this. He can evaluate how you did your homework and how that has progressed. And then after that, he can either dial you in and tighten you up more on that technique, or say, okay, now for the next month, let's work this. And I would put an ad in maybe the local paper or something. Say, hey, is there anyone with any experience that wants to train 1 or 2 nights a week? I built a little gym. And don't underestimate the value of even finding a high school wrestler as your training partner, because those guys obviously they understand the takedown game, which is imperative if you're going to be a grappler. But the other thing that they understand is positioning, base, pressure. And those are a lot of times those are the intangibles of jiu-jitsu. So if you can find someone that understands that, and then you start to work your kimuras and your triangles and your mounted arm bars, you're going to be that far ahead of where you would be without someone with that level of experience. When I was deployed, I would say every deployment after starting in 2004, which is when I started jiu-jitsu, I would go to the MWR trailer on whatever base, Blue Diamond or on the Green Zone. And I would go to the MWR trailer and ask the people that work there, hey, do you guys have a grappling club or a timeline or time allotted for guys to do jiu-jitsu or do MMA? And often they did. And if they didn't, I'd try and put it together myself. And what I found is literally every deployment, I could get a group of 3 to 15 guys, depending on where we were at, that wanted to train consistently. And sometimes I would be the guy that was leading the pack as a blue belt or as a purple belt. And then other times, there happened to be a brown belt or a black belt, and I would just attach myself at the hip to that guy and allow myself to gain as much knowledge as I could from him. So I would do the same thing. I would reach out to the local community, see if there's anybody that's interested, and hopefully be able to put something together with a group, a couple guys, and get that consistent training. All right, so I hope that answered a couple of your questions or gave you some ideas. Feel free to hit me up more if you have additional questions. I've been trying to stay on top of my Instagram lately. All right, question 2 from Brant. Greg, in one of your podcasts, I remember you talking to one of your guests about having a network ready when shit hits the fan. You talked about how one of your neighbors told you about the rice that was stored in their garage. And the Second Amendment, it is clear that the Founding Fathers intended us to have a well-regulated militia to be created and maintained. There are so many different militias out there that seem to be unorganized as a whole, such as the Three Percenters, Boogaloo Boys, and many others. I call myself a center-right conservative, holding some classic liberal but further right opinions. I feel like these groups find themselves on far-right libertarians. So he goes on to kind of gives a little more details, but I think the basis of his question is simply, what are we going to do if we find ourselves in I don't even want to say the Civil War or Revolutionary War, but just civil unrest where you may have to be defending yourself. You may have to be defending your family. I know he says here He wants to work with pro-constitution, pro-rule of law in the sheriff's office. And I think that that's something that most people would agree would be a good starting point for turning this country around. I mean, I could go off on a tangent on this question, and I think that right now, our country, and I've talked to people that are a lot older, a lot more experienced than me, they've never seen people behaving in the current state that they're behaving nationwide. And if I had to guess, if this doesn't somehow get turned around peacefully, it will turn violent. I mean, we saw groups of people with AR-15s surrounding police vehicles in Minneapolis yesterday. So at some point, if stuff doesn't somehow take a turn, and maybe the election will be the catalyst to turn the direction of our country around, only time will tell. But this is what I foresee happening. I foresee people getting so fed up with two different fronts that we're facing right now. The tyrannical government telling everybody what they can do, where they can go, what they have to wrap around their face, if their business can be open. All of this stuff is starting to just chip away at people to the point where you're going to back them in a corner and they're not going to have an option other than open their business or go about their daily lives because their livelihoods depend on it. So I think we're going to see a point where people get so fed up with the government that they're going to start pushing back. The other thing that's simultaneously going to happen is people are fed up with all of these jackasses running around, smashing things, burning things, looting, just causing mayhem. And they're not causing mayhem because they want to inspire change or see legislation take place. They're taking place in mayhem because they're young, they're wild, and they're inconsiderate. And that is another front that is going to have to be confronted at some point. We're starting to see that happen where people that are calling themselves patriots are going out and confronting these people. So it's almost like a triangle where you got the government, you got what I would call patriots or just citizens, and then you got the people out there that are purposely stirring the pot and starting shit like Antifa or some of the BLM protesters that they're not just protesting for civil liberties, they're protesting to incite violence and incite just destruction of property and whatnot. So at some point, I think what has to take place is the patriot aspect of that triangle is going to have to coordinate with each other and draw some hard lines in the sand of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And it's an interesting question because I'm going to be talking to Mike Glover soon. And if you're not familiar with him, look up his Instagram. He's a career special forces guy with a ton of experience. And he's built a company called American Contingency. And that's the whole point of that company, is to build a network of like-minded people and connect them, and then just put survivability first. And what I mean by that is everybody thinks because you can shoot a gun and you have some ammo that you're ready for instability or you're ready for the apocalypse. And I think Mike's approach is like a holistic approach where you have to think about your food sources and you have to think about electricity. You have to think about water. You have to think about a network of people that you can communicate with through ham radios. And he's doing a good job at bringing that network of people together. And I think that's the first step. In regards to answering your question, I think that's the first step. Because combat is easy. To be successful in combat, you have to be good at three things: shoot, move, and communicate. And they teach you that day one as a private in basic training. Shoot, move, and communicate. If you can do those three things, you're going to be successful on the battlefield. But in order to communicate, you have to have a pre-established network. And I think that that's what Mike's doing. And it's catching steam. And so that's why I'm going to look into that a little more. We're going to do a show, and hopefully we can really go into a question like this and give specific answers of who to contact, where to go, different timelines of things, and different pieces of equipment that will be necessary. Now, as far as supporting law enforcement, I think it's well established. I support law enforcement as much as anybody, but I also, just like I said at the beginning of this show, I don't support law enforcement that are out infringing on people's liberties. And I think if this goes bad, at some point, patrol level officers, are going to have to decide, where do I stand on this? And do I stand with the people, or do I keep enforcing these government orders and these government mandates? And once that choice is made, well, then you're going to have to live with that, and you're going to have to stand by whatever happens. But I think, and maybe this is just wishful thinking, but the overwhelming majority of law enforcement will stand with the people when that moment comes. Most officers I know are disgusted by the current state of our government and how they're treating people and what they're doing. Now, it's easy to say that. So when the time comes, we'll see if people put their money where their mouth is. But I am hopeful that patriots in combination with good law enforcement officers can band together and take this country back and get the stability that we deserve to give our children. So we'll see where it goes. Stand by for that podcast with Mike Glover, though, Brant, because I think it's going to have a lot of little nuanced answers to help clarify some of the things that you're worried about. All right, question 3 from Sean. Hey, Greg, thanks for being outspoken during this time. A lot of us feel the same way and are concerned about the consequences of expressing wrongthink. My question, do you think those of us that feel civil unrest is imminent and are conservative in talking and taking huge personal risk by organizing like Mike's American Contingency? Here we are again. This is on people's minds right now, and it's on people's minds for a reason. It seems impossible for conservatives to organize and prepare for unrest in a way that won't be characterized as white nationalist, racist, or an extremist movement in the press. I think we could be Eagle Scouts, and it wouldn't make a difference to the press. Thanks if you decide to take this question. Please limit to my first name. So thanks for the question, Sean. There's a reason why they want to characterize men like you and I taking measures to ensure that we have our security established and that we have our weaponry and that we have our network of people. There's a reason why it's going to be characterized as being an extremist movement. And that's because it scares them. This goes back to literally my first video that got attention nationwide. I said, the government needs to be afraid of waking the sleeping giant. And I still stand by that statement. And I think that the sleeping giant is guys like us that are coordinating, that are organizing, that are purchasing the right equipment, the right ammunition, and the right comms and vehicles and all the things that you're going to need if this does pop off. So obviously, I think we all know that the majority of the media is in bed with our government. Donald Trump always refers to it as fake news, and I don't care what side of the fence you're on. I think everybody agrees that the media you're consuming out of your television is 99% dog shit. And that's why people are coming to mediums like this, because they feel they can connect with real people with real opinions that aren't agenda driven. So I would say outside of the mainstream media, do your organization and work with companies like Mike's American Contingency. And who gives a shit what they want to classify us as? Because they can say whatever they want, and they're going to. And I'm sure that people are already saying that about Mike's movement. But the reason they're saying that stuff is because they're afraid. And why are they afraid? Because all it's going to take is a network of a few thousand people that share these points of view, and the government could be rendered helpless. And I really believe that. Me and Toby touched on that a couple episodes ago, how if you don't think a couple guys running around with rifles can be a real big problem, even for the world's most technologically advanced and elite military, go read a book on Afghanistan. It is absolutely possible. The will to win can take you far beyond what technology can take you. And so I think we need to put less concern on what we're being labeled as and what other people think we are, and just do what you need to do to prepare yourself and your family for worst case scenario. And I've never been one of these doomsday prepper guys, but to tell you the truth, I think not having the ability to sustain life for a few months, at least right now, is actually irresponsible. And so if you're in a profession or you're in a group of your peer groups aren't going to support you doing these things, or they're going to try and paint you out to be a bad person, maybe you just go low pro on it. Make your connections, make your necessary provisions, and you can be doing all this in the shadows, make your network, have your ability to communicate with people. And then if it pops off and you're ready, but you don't get caught with your pants down. Again, like I said, me and Mike will be getting together, so we'll go into that in depth over in the next couple episodes. All right, question 4 from Joshua. Good evening, Greg. My question is a 2-part question with some parallels you and I have. To give you a very quick baseline, I was a regular Army combat engineer. I served 2 deployments to Iraq and 1 peacekeeping deployment to Kosovo. Upon exiting my second contract, I started a career in local law enforcement. Just like you, I was fired recently for standing up. He goes on to tell a couple more details about his law enforcement career and whatnot. But the question is this: how did you transition from military to civilian life? Did you find it hard, or did you find life even in a paramilitary organization to be hard? And what I would tell him is, I know I touched on a lot of my transition in my mental health in episode 6 of this podcast, but my transition did not start until I left the contract world, for sure. The contracting world filled all of my voids that I would have felt walking away from the military. I had basically my platoon. I had a mission that I felt was important. I had guys that were ready to die for me, and I had guys that I was ready to die for. And so a lot of the things that feel really important to us and we put a lot of pride in being part of in the military, I had that. I had that in contracting. So I never felt that, like, just that emptiness or that lost, just feeling lost because I didn't have a purpose anymore. I didn't feel any of that until I left the contracting world. And the biggest thing for me was to find a new mission. Find your mission. And you have to find a mission that you believe in, that you feel is important, something that you're passionate about, and you have to put your time into that mission. And that mission is going to be building relationships with other people. It's going to be something that occupies your time, preferably something that also occupies your health. So while you're partaking in it, you're being physical, you're challenging yourself mentally, and it starts to give you that sense of purpose that you felt when you were in the military. It's a weird thing, man, for people to, at 18 years old, be cast into this thing that they feel this overwhelming sense of pride and camaraderie, and they know that it's dangerous and their life's on the line. All these different things that make being in the military just feel so important to you in your core on a level that's hard to explain. And then to try and walk away from that and just go back to a regular day job at the mall, that's something that is, I just don't think our brains are wired to go from one extreme to the other. I think that is why, in my opinion, a lot of soldiers and Marines do have a problem transitioning. I've said it a million times. I think it's less about the violence that they've seen and more about the lifestyle change and just feeling like a fish out of water. So his second part was, how have your law enforcement peers treated you since you've been fired? But that's an interesting question, because the people that are treating me poorly are actually not even interacting with me. I just hear it through the grapevine. And I've heard a lot of different rumors coming from my department from guys that I am staying in touch with and guys that I do consider my friends. And it's just like any other aspect of your life. The people that are hating on you rarely say it to your face. They rarely bring it to your attention. They're just talking shit in the lunchroom, obviously hoping that I don't find out, because otherwise they would reach out to me and say, hey, this is how I feel. And I can tell you, there is some people back at the Port of Seattle that are pushing a narrative that I did everything on purpose. I calculated this as an exit strategy and I don't care about the department. There are those people. And I mean, you could be Jesus Christ and people are going to come up with rumors and talk about what a piece of shit you are. So I don't let that bother me at all. The people that are hating on me don't give a shit. They can go be a miserable cop like most of them are, hate their life, be overweight, be incapable of doing their job at the level they should be doing it. And they can hate on me because I've left the career and I'm pursuing something new, i.e. this. But I do think that that's the minority. I have been reached out. I've had cops reach out to me from all over the country saying, thank you for being a voice. Thank you for speaking up. We appreciate what you did because even though you may have lost your job for it, it sparked a lot of conversation. It inspired people to really think about what they're doing. And I've had cops say that your video alone caused change in our department. So I think overall, the profession is supportive of what I've done. There's always some policy-driven, officer-minded people that are like, he violated policy. He's an idiot. Well, you're right. Maybe if you want to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, you can find a policy violation. But in my opinion, doing the right thing supersedes what is written in policy. But I would say most of my peers, people that respected me and that I had good relationships with, I still maintain those good relationships. You know, I've trained Jiu Jitsu with some of the cops from there a handful of times since then, and I'm still on the guys' group text messages and whatnot. So far, so good. I don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes, and to tell you the truth, I don't even care, because if they want to hate on me, go ahead and hate on me. That's between them and themselves. And if they want to put negative energy into something that they can have no effect on, feel free to do that. So thanks for that question, Josh. All right, next question. It's from Tyler. It said, what is your advice and thoughts on someone looking to go into the law enforcement profession right now? I love listening to your show and wish best of luck with you with it in the future. All right, Tyler. So the answer that I'm going to give you for this question may be unpopular with most cops, but I have to be honest with you. I can tell you all the good aspects about being a cop. I can tell you what I liked about the profession. I can tell you how the majority of police officers are good people, how I've worked for some really good leaders. I've also worked for some shitty leaders, but there's a lot that you can focus on in the profession that is good. With that said, I got 100 offers in different departments to go back into law enforcement since making the video. I got hit up from mostly sheriff's office because they are just wired a little differently than local police departments. But I probably had 100 offers from sheriff departments across the country saying, hey, come to work for us. You can walk on tomorrow. And I didn't. And I'm not doing that. And I'm not pursuing another job in law enforcement. I'm not going into a third agency hoping that it's going to get better this time. And I'll tell you why. From what I have experienced with all the good that you can keep in mind in this profession and all the good people that you would work with, the downside of it for me is too much. And the downside for me is chain of command not supporting your people and command staffs willing to hang people out to dry if they do anything that goes against the narrative. Yep, I knew it. You can hear my cats in the background scratching around at stuff. And so if I'm expected to go into a line of work where my job includes putting myself at risk of physical bodily injury and I mean, up into my life, I think that it's important for people to realize that for you to put yourself in a situation where you're risking everything, you have to know that you have 100% support from your chain of command. Give me 1 second. I'm going to shoo this cat away. All right, I'm back. So if you are going to put yourself in a situation where you may have to make a spur of the moment decision, you may have to use force, up into deadly force, and then you're going to be scrutinized for it, which you should be scrutinized for it. There's a reason why they do that, is because obviously they have to make sure that their cops are doing what's legal, moral, and ethical. But I think all you have to do is look at any situation over the last 4 or 5 months where cops are using use of force. They're not looking at what is legal or ethical. They're looking at what is going to push political pushback, what's going to cause outrage in people. And you're seeing it over and over and over. Cops are getting charged criminally for things that they would have never got charged for in the past. And it's because it's flavor of the month. Right now, it's cool to hate on cops. And, there's an ebb and flow to that that's been going on probably since the beginning of time, especially since the 94 Los Angeles riots. And cops sometimes have a good reputation. Sometimes they have a bad reputation, kind of depending on what's going on in the media and also what's going on in the rest of the world, because the media can focus on it accordingly. But I think that the media and the politicians have painted police officers and the profession into a corner. And now you are not going to be judged on your actions per se. You're going to be judged on what the rest of the internet thinks you did, or what what agenda the politicians are trying to push, or who they're trying to pander to ensure a re-election. And if locking you up and charging you criminally is going to help them get reelected, guess what? It doesn't matter what you did. They're going to talk to that prosecutor and they're going to have you arrested. And I mean, I've talked about it lots of times, but there was a former ranger in Pennsylvania that is looking to get criminally charged for macing people blocking the freeway. And you can find 100 instances of this kind of stuff happening. The other side of it is, because the politicians aren't standing up for their police and the media is painting them to be monsters, you have a huge percentage of the population that consumes their media through their television that now thinks police officers are just bloodthirsty pieces of shit. And I know that that's a false narrative. Many people listening know that's a false narrative. But the sad part about that is when you put your badge and your uniform on and you get in your patrol car in the morning, there's a lot of people that don't know that's a false narrative. And you are getting looked at sideways from the time you clock in, from the time you clock out. And it's exhausting, man. And I don't mean to sound like a pussy, but when I took my uniform off at the end of the day, when I took that off, I was also taking about fucking 10 pounds of stress off with it, because it gets old. It gets old day in and day out. People looking at you like you're the enemy when you're out there to try and help people. The whole reason you're in this profession is because you're trying to help people. And it's sad that I'm to the point where I'm saying this, but if you have a calling to help people, there's a good chance if you do it as a police officer, you're going to have a lot of people still casting hate your way. And how long do you want to deal with that? Do you want to feel that way for 20 years? I don't even think I fully understand the weight of what that is, because now that I've stepped away from the profession, I can literally feel like my soul being rejuvenated. I can feel my energy levels increasing. I'm happier. I've had people say that they can see it in my face. And it's because the career comes with a lot of political bullshit, and it comes with a lot of hate. And anybody that's listening that's interested in being a cop, don't take my experience and allow that to push you away. But I also have to just give you honesty about how I feel. And if I didn't, if I just pushed it's a good job and good benefits and good money, like all those things can be true, but it's how it affects you on the inside. It's how it affects your soul. And I was battling all kinds of insomnia issues. I've had this ebb and flow of depression, and I'm not saying that it was all related to the job, but a lot of times the job didn't help. And most cops that I know will give you the same answer. If you have a calling for public service and you have a calling for helping people, the fire department's hiring. They get to do a good mission. They get to help people, and they deal with 1/10 of the bullshit. And so, again, man, you got to do you. You got to pursue what you feel you need to pursue. But I would tell you that if policing is a calling that you just feel like you need to pursue, do your homework on the department, do your homework on the city, do your homework on the mayor and the city council and the prosecutor, and see if the people that you are going to technically be working for are the kind of people that would have your back or the kind of people that would string you up. Because there's a good chance that in a 20-year career, you're going to find yourself in some scenarios where you're going to be getting scrutinized, and you need to make sure that the people that you work for are in your corner. All right, next question. Question 6 from Max. I work night shift for a PD and recently made the SWAT team. I love it, but I've been struggling on how to structure my eating habits. They're really all over the place. Gas station food, whatever snacks people have dropped off at the PD, fast food, etc. I try to eat my best and eat healthy options, but I found overall to be a struggle on nights. I used to do intermittent fasting back in the day, but had a lot of success with it. However, I have been having a hard time trying to implement a good fasting schedule on nights. Some of this has to do with the fact that I switch back and forth between nights and days in order to spend time with my wife. I just feel like at a loss right now to have a structured diet with this hectic schedule. I'm still new to the job and want to make sure I have a long and healthy career. I work out regularly. I train BJJ. I've been training for years. Just wondering if you have any suggestions on this. Thank you. All right, Max. So I do have suggestions on this. And it's interesting you said that you implemented intermittent fasting and now you're having a problem with it, because when I first started reading your question, that was the first thing that I was going to say, that if I didn't have a healthy food option when I was on patrol, I just wouldn't eat. And I know that sounds like an asinine idea to people that are used to eating 3 meals a day. And at some point we'll do a whole podcast on fasting, because I'm kind of new to it. I've played around with it. I've done a few 3-day fasts, and I've done a lot of time restricted eating where I'll only eat for 4 hours a day and then I'll fast for 20 hours. And once your body gets accustomed to that, okay, I'll go to work today. I don't have a lunchbox. I'll always have water, but I wouldn't have any food. And 12.5-hour shift, I'd feel fine. It's the spikes in your blood sugar levels that most Americans are a slave to, because you eat every couple hours, you eat sugary foods, you eat high carbohydrate foods, and it spikes your blood sugar. And as soon as it spikes, it goes back down the other way. And now you feel that starving feeling, I got to eat again. And that's why Americans are a slave to eating every 3 hours. But when I got a little deeper into your question, it was interesting because you addressed that. And you said, I'm finding that switching back and forth from days to nights is making fasting hard. And I can tell you, man, night shift for me, and I didn't work, all my coworkers are going to be swearing at their phones because like Anderson got off night shift after 4 months or whatever. I did. I barely had any night shift. I lucked out and I gained seniority fast. I got off night shift after 4 months. I know a lot of patrol officers are working night shift for 4 years, but I hated it when I was on it. And for the exact same reasons that you said, it's not necessarily the hours that you're working. It's trying to switch back and forth, because I'm on night shift as a patrol officer, but when I'm not working, I'm dad and I'm husband, and I come home and I have to do all the normal things that I do around the house and with my kids. And it was just a nightmare trying to go back and forth. And on your days off, you try and get back on a normal schedule. And then within 2 or 3 days, you're starting to feel good. Okay, I'm kind of dialed back in, and then boom, you go back and you have to work nights. And I mean, if you listen to, I forget the person's name, but it was on the Joe Rogan Experience. He was a sleep specialist, and he said working nights is one of the worst things you can do for your brain. It literally incites the development of dementia. And there's a lot of reasons why working nights is bad for your body. But at the end of the day, that's your job right now. That's your schedule. And I'm sure you're not going to give that up just because of potential health risks. So what do? You mitigate those health risks. I would say anytime you're on patrol, I would bring a lunchbox. And in that lunchbox, I would have healthy food options. And that sat in my front right passenger seat. And I had those available anytime I was working. And I think it's important to just give yourself the opportunity, one day a week, say, okay, if you work a regular shift where you start Monday, sometime during the day on Sunday, do your meal prepping. And I suck at meal prepping when it comes to like cooking 20 chicken breasts and cutting them up into a bunch of containers and stuff like that. Some people, that's a good option for, because then everything is predetermined and everything is squared away, and all you have to do is grab a Tupperware and go. But for me, I don't know, maybe it's a discipline thing, but instead of actually meal prepping for every specific meal, it would be more of like, we go to Costco and we get a big bag of macadamia nuts. We buy a bunch of small packets of almond butter or macadamia butter. Things that I can just eat on the go, or some protein sources that are clean, or just depending on where I'm at in my diet. If I am in a phase where I'm eating more carbohydrates, I'll put some fruit in there or a salad, and always have those options available. And if you're not willing to spend the time to set up enough predetermined meals or prepackaged meals, there's a ton of places online that do that for you too. So I didn't see where you work in the question, but I know like in the Pacific Northwest, there's this place called Northwest Fit Meals, and it's exactly like all the other online nutrition companies. You can kind of tell them like what your diet is, your goals, your caloric intake, and they'll send you however many meals that you request. And so if you're working however many days a week, maybe it's worth your time to set something up like that, and they send you 4 or 5 prepackaged meals, and you have that in the chute waiting to go for when you start your week. The one thing that I would never do is, I'm so hungry, I'm going to go eat McDonald's, or I'm just going to go to the gas station and get some bullshit candy bar. No matter how hungry I was, I'd rather fast than do that. Or take the time to, I'm sure there's a GNC or super supplements, or, well, never mind. If you're night shift, all that stuff's probably closed. But you find somewhere that offers some kind of healthy option and have that be your go-to place. Like if my cooler was empty for whatever reason, I mean, life happens, right? I would always fall back on the Starbucks egg bites. Cause they're overpriced and they're ridiculous, but it's a good, quick, healthy option that you don't feel like you've eaten a bunch of shit food afterwards. Or like the Chick-fil-A, they have grilled nuggets, not the deep fried stuff, but the grilled ones. There you go again. In a matter of 4 minutes in a drive-through, you can have a healthy option in front of you. And I would pre-plan out like where the healthy places were within my patrol jurisdiction. And now I have a few options. SWAT callouts are going to be a little different because you don't know where you're going to go and you're not going to have a timeline. So for that, maybe in your go bag, you do have some non-perishable healthy options, some quality protein bars, or some different shakes. In a shaker, you can just dump some water in and get some nutrients in you. But yeah, I mean, when I was doing that stuff in LA, we would get call outs, and I mean, sometimes we'd be in Compton, and I'd hit like the Starbucks app trying to find a local Starbucks to try and go get some eggs or something real quick, and they're non-existent. So depending on where you're at, you're going to have to pre-plan and just kind of set your gear bag up so you have some options. So yeah, thanks for that question, Max. All right, this one is from Joseph. Hi, Greg. Can you share your nasal issues? I have similar issues. Haven't been to the doc to fix my deviated septum or investigate further since I was a teen. I planned to last year, but my back pain flared up and it had to be prioritized. So, all right, Joe, this is an interesting question because I had such severe damage to my nose that I haven't been able to breathe. I keep saying a decade, but it might have been 2 decades. I don't really know. I don't even remember ever breathing through my nose. So that's how long it's been. And I don't know if it's necessarily from fighting, or maybe I was just born with a really deviated septum, or truth be told, it's probably a combination of both. But it got to a point where I could get no air through my nose. So I went to a ear, nose, and throat doctor who was also a plastic surgeon and had a CAT scan done on my face. And he said that my nose had 3 separate fractures in it and that I had a severely deviated septum, and that it's clear to him why I can't breathe. And so we scheduled a surgery, and I mean, that was actually my first time being put out for surgery. And I'm not going to lie, it was nerve wracking. It's interesting because a lot of dangerous things that I've confronted, I don't really have a sense of fear regarding them. And that's not because of some like just tough guy quality. It's just, I get mission focused, and any sense of fear gets put on the back burner, and it's go time. But surgery was very different. It's getting rolled into a ice cold room on a gurney, and I looked over, and there was a whole counter full of medieval torture looking tools. It looked like I was about to be William Wallace getting disemboweled in front of the crowd. And they stick the needle in your arm, and she says, start counting. And I was like, oh man, because it's absolute lack of control, and you know they're going to be cutting your face open any second. And so if you look at my Instagram, you can see a picture of that surgery. I know a lot of people were disgusted with it. Like, man, why would you post that? But hey, that's part of it. That's how it goes. You know, that's jiu-jitsu lifestyle. I had my nose broken enough times. I had to have it addressed, and guess what? That's what it looks like. But for those of you who didn't like it, you'll be happy to hear Instagram put a little warning filter on it. So if you're ever scrolling through my feed, you don't have to see that. But I got the surgery, and I would say within a week, I could breathe through my nose. And I was like, wow, this was magical. And I felt like, oh, I think this worked, because the doctor said, like, this isn't 100%. Sometimes we have success. Sometimes we don't. We may have to do a follow-up surgery. And I was able to breathe for probably a week, and then it felt like it closed up again. And it didn't make any sense to me, because if the physical structure of my nose had changed, then why can't I breathe? And it was really frustrating, because I was really looking forward to this surgery correcting this issue. And so after, my nose and everything kind of went back to normal after a couple months, where the pain was gone, the swelling was gone, the tingling went away. And then after it was all said and done, I couldn't breathe still. And I went back for a follow-up appointment. And the guy said, he's a really cool doctor. His name's Dr. Simplenny at Bellevue, Washington. And I would recommend him. He said, your turbinates may still be too large. And he goes, I guess what you don't want to do in the world of surgery is take too much away, because if you overdo it, it's a lot harder to put back than it is if you underdo it to go in and shave a little more off. So he's like, I corrected your fractures. I corrected your deviated septum. And now we may have to do a second surgery and address the turbinates, which he did shave down, but not very much. And the thought of doing a second surgery was just miserable. So I just sat on it. And like I said, it's been a year and a half now. And I was kind of just hopeless. Okay, I gave it a try. It didn't work. It wasn't until about a month ago that I heard James Nestor on Joe Rogan's podcast and picked up the book Breath. If you're watching, I'm holding it up right now. So it's James Nestor, Breath. And it's the new science of a lost art. And he's talking about breathing. And I'm here to tell you guys, I think every human being on planet Earth should read this book. I learned to breathe, and I've regained the use of my nose to what I would consider probably almost 100%. Like, that was breathing through my nose. I haven't been able to do that ever. And what he talks about in this book is breathing exercises, breathing techniques. And he really talks about how in order for your nose to function properly, you have to use your nose. And you have to pursue it like vigorously. You have to go through exercises. You have to keep your mouth shut while you sleep. And some of the things that he says, they sound kind of crazy. Like, why would we have to fight to use our nose? But he talks about different things, like humans transitioning from hard foods to soft foods have actually changed the structure of our face. And through that change of our anatomy, our airways have actually collapsed a little bit. forcing us to become mouth breathers. And you'll have to read the book because there's a million different studies and experiments that they do where they only allow you to breathe through your mouth or they only allow you to breathe through your nose. And over and over and over again, the health benefits of breathing through your nose it's vast, and it gives you more nitric oxide and it lowers your blood pressure. And, the first thing that happened to me that made me want to even look into getting my nose fixed initially was my dentist was like, "Hey, can you breathe through your nose?" And I was like, "Why is my dentist asking about if I can breathe through my nose?" I was like, "No, not at all." He goes, "Yeah, I can tell because your gums are getting dried out every night and it's starting to make them recede. It's really bad for your teeth to dry out every single night. And you're going to want to get that corrected." And so that was what started this journey to start with. And, fast forward a year and a half later, I'm finally figuring out how to breathe through my nose. So I believe I probably needed the surgery to fix the physical anatomy. And then I needed the book to learn how to actually breathe. And it's been fascinating. You can tell just by how I'm talking about it that it's exciting. But, I have another book in the chute. I think it's called The Oxygen Advantage from Patrick McEwen. And there's just so much to learn about breathing that you would just think is ridiculous. If you would have told me a couple of years ago, "Hey, you should buy a book and learn to breathe," I would just have thought you're a wacko. But I'm getting drawn more and more towards Eastern medicine and like naturopathic healing than I ever have been in the past. And I'm not to say like I'm an anti-vaxxer or I'm not for Western medicine, but I also think it's foolish to ignore thousands and thousands of years of methods that people found beneficial. This book talks about a lot of the breathing exercises that monks do, that they can change their body temperature and they can literally put themselves in different states of suspended animation. They can change their heart rate and all this stuff through breathing techniques. And now Wim Hof is doing the same thing. And in conjunction of cold water exposure, he's been able to like fight off viruses and do things that they thought that wasn't possible with your physiology. And now science is actually supporting what we're seeing. So I think it's exciting. There's a lot that can go into breathing. There was one experiment in the book that James Nestor talked about. He gave a breathing exercise. It was a 6-minute exercise. And it was I forget the exact pattern, but it was a nasal breathing exercise for 6 minutes. He said, "Do this or take your blood pressure, do 6 minutes of breathing, and then take your blood pressure again." And it dropped by almost 15 points. And I've always had slightly high blood pressure, like high 130s over high 80s. Not terrible, but not great. And it's funny. I just got this question because I literally had a physical earlier today and I think I was 123 over 70. She's like, "Hey, your blood pressure looks great." And truth be told, I did a few minutes of nasal breathing right before the cuff went on because I was like, I'm going to see if I'm going to be in the high 130s, low 140s, or if this is going to work again. And boom, it worked. So, how much of it is physiology? How much of it is anatomy? How much of it is placebo? I mean, there's probably elements of all of that stuff involved. But what I can tell you is learning to breathe after reading this book has changed my life. So I've been sharing this book on my Instagram, giving James Nestor shout outs because I think, like I said, if anyone's going to read one book in their life, that will be the one. All right, next question. And this is going to be our last question. And she asked to remain completely anonymous. So it says, "Would you be able to speak a little bit on the political divide in this country? I'm personally an independent moderate politically, but I want to know your thoughts on the two-party system. Do you think we need to change? Would you support a third party if they were able to gather enough votes? And do you think it's even possible? What needs to change?" And this is an awesome question. I think, again, this is a question we could do an entire podcast on because I don't know if there's one human being in the United States that doesn't feel like the two-party system has failed us. Here we are again, presidential election, and it's Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And the other side of like whatever person that you're supporting, the other side vehemently hates the other party's candidate. And I'm caught up in that too. I think Joe, I'm not going to sit here and try and play middle of the road. I'll be voting for Donald Trump. I'll be voting for Donald Trump for a lot of reasons. But I'm also not always going to be Republican. What my goal was for this presidential election was to vote for the person that seemed to have a genuine heart, that seemed to have not be driven by political agendas or what they can gain for their party or for their lobbyist, but who's looking out for the American people. And I think most Americans would agree our political leaders across the board are not looking out for the American people. They're looking out for their bank account. They're looking out for their second house. I mean, Joe Biden's been in politics for 50 years. He got into politics in his 20s. And now what? And now here we are 50 years later, and he's running for president. And I don't feel like that guy is doing or saying anything that's inspiring. I don't look at what he's saying and think, wow, that guy might change the trajectory of this country. I watched the DNC convention a few days ago, and the whole convention was talking about how shitty Donald Trump is. And leadership 101, like, you're not going to gain any clout with me by talking about how fucked up everybody else is. What you need to be talking about is what you bring to the table, your tools, what you can do to inspire and change people. And I feel like the candidates that have that ability get kind of snuffed out. I mentioned Tulsi Gabbard a couple podcasts ago, and I got a lot of hate because she's a Democrat, and obviously being more of a right-leaning conservative, people that are listening to this are like just obviously anti-Democrat for reasons that are, a lot of it has merit, but some of it is, I think you have to be able to step outside of your party and say, what's this person about? And what do they bring to the table? And again, in their core, are they a good person? And are they driven by a desire to serve? Are they a selfless leader, or are they a selfish leader? And I think everyone in Washington is selfish lately. And so do I think a third party is a viable option? Man, that's a tough one, because the Democrats and the Republicans have just taken control of the system in a way that I don't know if it could be taken back with anything short of like a second American Revolution. If you go through all the past presidents, there were other parties. I mean, that was normal. And there was a bunch of different parties that people would be affiliated with that could be voted into the presidential position. And that's no longer the case. I think almost any time a third party runs, you are detracting from either the Republican or the Democratic candidate, depending on who that person is. If it's like a Ralph Nader, you're probably going to be detracting from the left. And if it's a Ross Perot, you're going to be detracting from the right. So a lot of people will say, if you vote third party, you're throwing your vote away. It's a waste of your vote. And I can see that argument, because if that third party is only getting, 12% of the vote or whatever it is, well, it's pretty established that they're not going to win. So now you got to think about the amount of votes that went to that person. What would they have done if they were divided up between other candidates, or if they went to the majority of the right or to the left? And that's a real concern. To say that it's not is kind of foolish. But then there's also the point of view that if you never vote for a third party and you write it off as a possibility, then that's a 100% way to ensure that we're stuck with the two-party system that everybody feels is failing us. So this is what I hope to see. I'm hoping in 2024, regardless if it's Trump or Biden, I think people are starved. I think they're starving for someone that is inspirational, someone that can connect with people, someone that can get up on that stage, take questions, shoot the shit, just put themselves on a level where people feel like this guy or this gal gets me. They've been part of the struggle, and they're trying to operate with a strong moral compass, and they've been in my shoes, and someone that can get up there and tell a story that is inspiring to people. I think that candidate needs to come to fruition. That candidate needs to rise to the top. And I know they're out there. And I know a lot of people want to see Crenshaw in 2024 do it on the Republican side. And I got nothing bad to say about him. I think Crenshaw has a lot of good attributes, and there's a lot of things that he could do, I think, to be viable. But I think people are tired. I mean, this question proves it. People are tired of the two-party system. And I think 2024 could be the year where it would be like there for the taking. If the right person arrived, I mean, the next 4 years are going to determine a lot, right? Who knows who we get? Do we get Biden or do we get Trump? And then based on how they do over the next 4 years, if there's still just nonstop discontent and division and anger and hatred between the two parties, it might be just right there for the taking for a third party to step in and put the right person in front of an audience that captivates people and inspires. Leadership. The presidential position needs to be looked at from a basic leadership standpoint. You need to be able to inspire people. If you can't inspire people, how are you going to consider yourself a leader? Jocko talks about it all the time. That's why I love Jocko's podcast, because leadership, sure, he learned it on the battlefield and in the military, which is similar to where I learned it. But leadership is applicable to anywhere on planet Earth. And that's why he's been so successful taking leadership principles and applying them to businesses back home, because the principles don't change. And I don't think it changes between the battlefield and the corporations and politics. Let's have someone that puts their people before themselves. Let's have someone that has walked in your shoes and gets what it's like to be you. Let's have someone that takes responsibility. That's what I'm dying to see. I don't know about you guys. I am dying to see a politician take responsibility. Like Jocko says, there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. And things that go bad, you take responsibility for. Things that go good, you give those allocates to your men and to your women or your soldiers. And what we're seeing over the last, 10 years is no matter what a politician does, they have an excuse a mile long. They're pointing fingers. Turn on the news for 5 minutes and all of this COVID stuff. I have yet to see a politician say, hey, listen, when this whole thing kicked off, we were very nervous and we were concerned that X, Y, and Z may be taking place. And we made some errors in our calculations. Some of our models predicted things improperly, and we kind of implemented a knee-jerk reaction, and we apologize. We're sorry that it hurt your businesses. We're sorry that we shut your kids' schools down. Like, there's absolutely no remorse for any of the errors that they've made. In fact, it's the opposite. Even again, like, if you try and look into what anybody has to say about the political, the mishandling of this by our politicians, it's just casting blame back and forth. Donald Trump didn't do this. Donald Trump didn't do that. And then you have all the governors that are continuing to shut everything down. And I think everybody understands now that it's not because of COVID-19. It's about pushing a political agenda. It's about pushing a narrative. And people have absolutely had it. So you have people all over the country now that the two-party system isn't just frustrating to them, and it's not something that they're annoyed by when they hear it on TV. The two-party system is at each other's throats to the point where they will sacrifice the American people's livelihoods just to get those votes, just to maintain power. That's my opinion on it. That's where I think we've arrived at. And so if that's the case, these parties are more concerned about keeping themselves in power as opposed to keeping your business open and keeping your children fed. Yeah, it's time for a third party. And again, It's going to be easier said than done, but I think the right person could do it. And the reality of today's world, it's probably going to be a person that already has a lot of notoriety. It's going to be hard for a guy like me to step up and say, hey, listen, two-party system's failing you. This is what I could do. Because it's easy to talk. It's easy to get in front of people and say something. But what does your record show? Who are you in your core? Joe Rogan talks about like The Rock and Jocko should run together. And some people laugh at that. I bet if they ran independent, I bet they could win, because The Rock already has 50 million people that follow him. That alone, that right there, he inspires a lot of people. And then Jocko, well, his record speaks for himself. So if you did get the right people, and I'm not advocating that or saying that I hope that happens. I'm saying just with the current state in our country, I think people want to change. And I think that could be a viable third party is going to have to come from someone who already has a lot of notoriety in the media. And I think that's why Trump won. I do. I think that's why Trump won, because again, he already had a lot of notoriety in the media. He's had a lifelong career in the public eye, and people were sick of politics as usual. Now, regardless if you're happy with how he's doing or not, it's not politics as usual. It's a different approach, and people wanted a different approach. And so again, like that's why I'll be voting for him again. Everybody, not to go one way or the other, because this question was about a third party, but I think right now for this race, I don't think a third party is viable, and I will be going Republican again, and we'll see where it goes. But in the future, yeah, man, that's something that I think this country needs, because we're being held hostage by these two parties. All right. So that was an hour and 12 minutes, just going over a handful of questions. And like I said, I think this is something I want to try and do maybe every 10 episodes. I think that'd be good. Every 10 episodes, interact with the people listening, because again, I think the whole reason people enjoy podcasts is because we're finding conversation on our commutes or while we're out running or hiking. We're getting that fed, that desire to interact with human beings, that tribal desire. And instead of just me being up here talking about whatever I want, I think it'd be good to interact with the people that are giving me their time and valuing my opinions and what I have to say. So other than that, this is going to wrap up episode 10. I've had a lot of people hit me up asking about when my buddy, who's a doctor, is going to be on the show talking about COVID-19. He had 200 COVID patients in Queens, New York. I hope we'll be recording sometime this weekend. And so the show will be released a couple weeks after that, but hoping to get on the books with him, hoping to get on the books with Mike Glover. And we got a few pretty cool shows in the pipe. So thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. And until next time, I'm out.